Hello, children. Today we will read the story The Little Match Girl. It is there in chapter 7 of your Treasure Trove book. So, as we read and understand the story, I want you all to open your book and refer to the text. Now, before we begin the story, let us read a little about the author, who is Hans Christian Andersen. He is a Danish writer, means that he is from Denmark, and he is famous for writing fairy tales. Now, when we think of fairy tales, we often think of stories that have been written for children. But Hans Christian Andersen, his stories, they deal with very deep and beautiful meanings and beautiful themes which can be enjoyed not just by children but also by adults. And Andersen, he himself had a very sad childhood, so his stories, they often deal with very sad and pessimistic themes of loss and death. Now, even this story which we are about to read, that is The Little Match Girl, it also deals with a very sad theme. Okay, it is a very sad story about a small girl who just dies on the street because of cold and hunger. So, in this story, you will find themes of poverty, hunger, then the issue of child labor, the difference in the lifestyle of the rich people and the poor people, the cruelty of people around us and the lack of sympathy, the bitterness and coldness in the hearts of people, and also the rich imagination and creativity in a child's mind. Now we shall begin with the story, okay?
It was bitterly cold, snow was falling, and darkness was gathering, for it was the last evening of the old year. It was New Year's Eve. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl walked, bareheaded and barefoot, through the streets. So you can see that this story is set on New Year's Eve, that is, the evening of 31st December. And the weather, it is bitterly cold, means it was extremely cold, feeling very unpleasant. Now you can imagine that in this cold weather, there is a poor little girl, a small child, who is walking bareheaded and barefoot. Bareheaded means she has nothing to cover her head with, and she is even barefoot. She had been wearing slippers, it is true, when she left home, but what good were they? They had been her mother's, so you can imagine how big they were. The little girl had lost them as she ran across the street to escape from two carriages that were being driven terribly fast. So you can see that it is New Year's Eve and everybody is just so busy. They're driving in their carriages very swiftly, and nobody has the time or the kindness to notice this poor little girl. And when she left home, she was wearing slippers, and those slippers, they belonged to her mother, so they were very big for her. But what happened to her slippers? Unfortunately, she lost them as well. And how did she lose them? When she was trying to run away from two carriages that were being driven very fast. Okay. One slipper could not be found, and a boy had run off with the other, saying it would come in very handy as a cradle some day when he had children of his own. Now you all know what is a cradle, right? It is where a baby sleeps. And can somebody make a cradle out of a slipper? Probably no. Okay, so you can see that this boy is just teasing her for wearing big slippers. Okay, they were so big that they seemed like cradle. And this boy, he's just very rude. He's teasing and bullying her, and he's also very unkind. Okay, even though he knows that it is very cold and this girl will be left barefoot, but still he doesn't return her slipper. He just runs away with it. So you can see that this coldness is not just limited to the weather, but even the people. The people around her are also very cold hearted. They don't have any kindness or sympathy for this poor little girl. So the little girl walked about the streets on her naked feet, which were red and blue with the cold. In her old apron she carried a great many matches, and she had a packet of them in her hand as well. Nobody had bought any from her, and no one had given her a single penny all day. She crept along, shivering and hungry, the picture of misery. Poor little thing! So you can see that this child, instead of being at her home celebrating the New Year's Eve with her family, she has to walk on the streets and try to sell the matches. Okay, so here you also see the picture of child labor. Okay, she's just a small child, but yet she has to go to the streets and try to sell the matches and bring back money. And poor girl, that day nobody had bought any match from her and she didn't have a single penny. Now you can see the description. Okay, she's referred to as the picture of misery, poor little thing. So you can see how miserable or how terrible her condition was. The snowflakes fell on her long golden hair, which curled so prettily about her neck. But she did not think of her appearance now. You can see that she is a very lovely child. She is very beautiful with long golden hair. Lights were shining in every window, and there was a glorious smell of roast goose in the street, for this was New Year's Eve, and she could not think of anything else. So since this was New Year, everybody was in a festive mood, and lights were shining from their houses, and people were eating very nice food. There was a glorious smell of roast goose, a great smell of roast goose coming from the houses. But poor little girl, nobody had given her anything to eat, and she was just walking in the cold, and she was hungry and starving. So she could only think of food as she was very hungry. She huddled down in a heap in a corner formed by two houses, one of which projected further out into the street than the other, but though she tucked her little legs up under her, she felt colder and colder. So now when this poor little girl, she couldn't walk anymore, she decided to sit in a corner. Okay, there was a corner in the street between two houses, and she just huddled down, means she crouched and sat down in that corner, and she was trying to tuck her little legs, okay, in order to make herself feel warm, but still she felt colder because it was extremely cold. She did not dare to go home, for she had sold no matches and earned not a single penny. Okay, so she was supposed to sell the matches and bring home money, but since that day she had not sold any matches, so she was scared to go home. Her father would be sure to beat her, and besides, it was so cold at home. So look at this picture of the father. Okay, he is not a very kind and loving father, but in fact he is a very cruel person. He has sent his small daughter to sell matches, and if she goes home without bringing any money, then this father will very cruelly beat her. Okay, so this poor little child, she is frightened to go home, and hence she decides to sit there in the corner. And even her house, okay, for they had nothing but the roof above them, and the wind whistled through that, even though the largest cracks were stuffed with straw and rags. So just see the description of her house. Okay, they have nothing but the roof, and there are cracks on the wall, and the cracks have been stuffed with straw and rags. But in spite of that, the wind just blows through the house, and even inside the house, it is very cold. Her thin hands were almost numb with cold. If only she dared pull just one small match from the packet, strike it on the wall, and warm her fingers. So now even her fingers are numb, senseless with cold. And she was supposed to sell the matches and not light them, but now she is feeling so cold that She wants to pull one match from the packet, light it up, and warm her fingers. Now, how big is the fire from a matchstick, right? It can't warm her entire body, but at least like she wants to warm her fingers. She pulled one out. Scratch! How it spluttered and burned. So you can see the sound effect. Okay, when we strike a matchstick, it burns with that scratch sound. How it spluttered means burning with that sound and burned. It had a warm, bright flame, like a tiny candle, when she held her hand over it. So she was just trying to warm her hand over the flame from the matchstick. But what a strange light! It seemed to the little girl as if she were sitting in front of a great iron stove, with polished brass knobs and brass ornaments. The fire burned so beautifully and gave out such a lovely warmth. Okay, so you can see that as she strikes the matchstick, she starts seeing a very strange vision. Okay, she starts seeing a great iron stove in front of her, and she sees this beautiful room with brass knobs and brass ornaments. Remember her condition at in her house? Okay, it wasn't good. Her house was just made of rags. But now she's seeing this beautiful room with brass knobs and brass ornaments. And she was freezing. Okay, she was feeling extremely cold and she desired for warmth. So maybe that's why she is seeing this vision of the great iron stove. The fire burned so beautifully and gave out such a lovely warmth. Okay, so now she is receiving that warmth which she was desiring. Oh, how wonderful that was! The child had already stretched her feet to warm them, too, when out went the flame. Okay, remember that she started seeing this vision when she had lighted the matchstick. But how long can a matchstick last, right? So when that matchstick it went out, okay, the flame went out, the stove also vanished, and there she sat with the burnt match in her hand. Okay, so suddenly now when the matchstick is finished burning, the vision also vanished. The iron stove and everything, they just disappeared. She struck another. It burnt clearly, and where the light fell upon the wall, the bricks became transparent, like gauze. Okay, so she's so mesmerized by the earlier vision that now she wants to see it again. So she strikes another matchstick, and this time what happens when the matchstick burns? The wall in front of her, okay, the bricks of the wall, they start becoming transparent like gauze. Gauze is a very thin fabric which you can see through, okay. So now the bricks become transparent like gauze. She could see right into the room where a shining white cloth was spread on the table. It was covered with beautiful china. Beautiful china means all the plates and cups and dishes that are made with china clay, and in the center of it stood a roast goose stuffed with prunes and apples, steaming deliciously. So this girl, she wasn't just feeling cold, but she was feeling very hungry also. She was starving. And earlier, when she was walking through the streets, she had got the smell of roast goose. And now she's seeing this vision of a beautiful dining table, and the roast goose is there right in front of her. And what was even more wonderful was that the goose hopped down from the dish. Okay, so now she sees that the roast goose, okay, just like in cartoon, it just comes and hops down from the table, jumps down from the table, waddled across the floor with carving knife and fork in its back. Waddled means the movement of ducks and goose and all, okay, like they move in a very swing kind of motion, right? So this goose, it just waddled across the floor, and it had also a carving knife and fork in its back. So it seemed like as if the goose was just coming straight towards her, telling her to eat it. Waddled straight up to the poor child. Then out went the match, but unfortunately what happened? Again the matchstick, it finished burning and the flame, it just went out. And nothing could be seen but the thick, cold wall. She struck another match, and suddenly she was sitting under the most beautiful Christmas tree. Now, this girl, she is seeing everything that she was desiring. Okay, she was freezing from the cold. So, in the first vision, what does she see? She sees a great iron stove giving her all the warmth. And she was also hungry and starving. So, in the second vision, she sees a beautiful dining table with roast goose. Now, in the third vision, she is seeing a beautiful Christmas tree. Children are usually excited about Christmas and Christmas tree, right? So now this girl is seeing a beautiful Christmas tree. It was much larger and much lovelier than the one she had seen last year through the glass doors of the rich merchant's house. So last year also she had seen a Christmas tree in a rich merchant's house. And you can see that this glass door is like a barrier between the world of the rich merchant and the world of the poor people, the poor girl. She can't have the Christmas tree in her own house, and she can't enter the house of the rich merchant. So all that she can do is stare or look at the Christmas tree from outside the glass door. But now, in this third vision, as she strikes the matchstick, she sees a Christmas tree which is even more beautiful than that in the merchant's house. 1,000 candles lit up the green branches, and gaily colored balls like those in the shop windows looked down upon her. The little girl reached forward with both hands. Okay, so in this Christmas tree, she is seeing a lot of candles and gaily colored balls, and she wants to touch those balls. Okay, so she is reaching forward with both hands. Then out went the match. But again this matchstick, it finished burning and the flame went out. But this time the vision, it doesn't disappear suddenly. Okay, but what happens is the many candles on the Christmas tree rose higher and higher through the air, and she saw that they had now turned into bright stars. Okay, so the candles from the Christmas tree, they just rise high, and then what happens? They turn into the bright stars in the sky. Okay, so now she sees the bright stars in the sky. One of them fell, streaking the sky with light, and then as she is like looking at the stars in the sky, one of the stars, it just falls, okay, streaking the sky. Now someone is dying, said the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only one who had ever been good to her, but who was now dead, had said, whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. Okay, so as she sees the star falling, what does she think? She thinks that somebody is dying now, somebody will die now, because her grandmother, okay, she used to have a grandmother who was not like her father. Her father is very cruel, but this grandmother was very loving and kind to her. Okay, and this grandmother, she used to tell her that whenever a star falls, then somebody will die. So she thinks that, okay, whenever a star falls, a soul goes up to God. But this is like very sad and ironical, because now in the next moment it is she herself, this little girl, who actually dies. So now she's thinking that somebody will die, okay, but she doesn't know that it will be her who will die. She struck another match on the wall. Once more there was light, and in the glow stood her old grandmother. Oh, so bright and shining, and looking so gentle, kind, and loving. So this is her fourth vision and also the last vision. As you all know that she is seeing the things which are not there in her real life, okay, and which she wants desperately. She wanted warmth, so she saw the iron stove. Then she was very hungry, she was craving for food, and she saw the roasted goose, and maybe she was excited for a Christmas tree, so she saw that also. And you all know that there is no one who loves her, okay, nobody who cares for her. Even her father is very cruel and beats her up. Okay, so in the fourth vision, she is seeing her grandmother who is already dead but who used to be very kind and loving towards her. Okay, Granny, cried the little girl, oh, take me with you. I know you will disappear when the match is burnt out. You will vanish like the warm stove, the lovely roast goose, and the great glorious Christmas tree. Okay, so poor little girl, she's very happy. She's very excited to see her grandmother. Okay, but at the same time, she's also scared. She knows that her visions will disappear when the matchstick finish burning. Okay, so she's scared that even her grandmother will disappear, and she's telling her to take her also. Okay. Then she quickly struck all the rest of the matches she had in the packet, for she did so want to keep her grandmother with her. So she was very desperate, okay, and she was striking and lighting all the matchsticks. The matches flared up with such a blaze that it was brighter than broad daylight, and her old grandmother had never seemed so beautiful or so stately before. So now her grandmother is looking like an angel. She took the little girl in her arms and flew up with her high up, oh, so high, towards glory and joy. Now they knew neither cold nor hunger nor fear, for they were both with God. So here you see that the little girl is dying. Okay, and the author describes it in a beautiful way. Okay, not directly, but you can see that her soul, the soul of the little girl, is being taken away and going up to God with with her grandmother. Okay, and there in heaven, in the kingdom of God, there is no pain. Okay, nothing like cold, hunger, or fear. Okay, so she is going to God. But in the cold dawn, in the corner formed by the two houses, sat the little girl with rosy cheeks and smiling lips, dead. So, in the morning, her dead body was found in that corner, okay? And even though she was dead, she had rosy cheeks and smiling lips. So, in her last moment, she was happy. She was happy to be reunited with her grandmother and to go with her to God. Frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. So, when everybody was celebrating the last evening of the old year, means the New Year's Eve, this poor little girl had just frozen to death. The dawn of the new year rose on the huddled figure of the girl. She was still holding the matches, and half a packet had been burnt. She was evidently trying to warm herself, people said. So now, okay, before nobody looked at her, or nobody had time to care for her. But now, since they found her dead body, people were gathered there, and then they were talking about her, okay, and people were saying she was clearly trying to warm herself. But no one knew what beautiful visions she had seen and in what a blaze of glory she had entered with her dear old grandmother into the heavenly joy and gladness of a new year. So the people, they were not aware of all the beautiful visions which she had seen before dying, and how she had now gone with her grandmother to the kingdom of God. Okay, and how this new year had brought a new world to her. Okay, obviously not that she is alive now. Okay, she is already dead, but even in death, it was like as if she transcended into a new world of heaven. Okay, where there is no coldness, where there is no hunger, and where there is no fear.